Every New Mexican deserves to understand how the law works for them, or why it doesn't work for them. Welcome to New Mexico Legal Lowdown, hosted by attorney Feliz Rael. Each episode, we will help demystify the legal system and uncover misconceptions through real conversations with New Mexico trial lawyers. Produced and powered by LawPods.
This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our La Justicia Circle supporters, Singleton Schreiber, Nick Rowley, Lori Benco, Sherry LaCour, and McGinn, Montoya, Love, Curry, and Sievers, PA. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. And now, on to our conversation. Hi, welcome to the New Mexico Legal Lowdown podcast. We are trial lawyers or plaintiff lawyers talking about the civil justice system in New Mexico. The laws in New Mexico may be different from the laws in other states. The purpose of the podcast is to provide general information and to demystify the civil legal process in New Mexico. It is not a substitute for appropriate legal advice in any individual case. Please contact a lawyer if you want to talk about your particular case. And today, I am super excited to introduce all of you to Johana Bencomo. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Johana. Pretend H is not there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Who I am starting to get to know and I think is a super impressive person. She is the current executive director of New Mexico Safety Over Profit and works with a lot of people who have gone through the civil legal system. So even though she's not a lawyer, I thought that Johana would have very important context to help bridge the gap between what happens in the civil legal system and, the people who are experiencing it. So welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Felice. This is really exciting endeavor. And just as I'm learning so much about the legal profession and through this lens, I'm so glad that you're putting this out to other people. Like you said, my name is Johana Bencomo. I am the executive director of New Mexico Safety Over Profit. I also happen to serve currently on the Las Cruces City Council. I have my master's in social work and have been doing community organizing and political advocacy work for almost 15 years. Really, for my entire career, I've really dedicated to social justice movements, and so much of the work I'd done before was around immigrant rights work, workers' rights issues, and then of course I got elected in 2019, and since I've been on the council, so much of my focus has been around certainly like justice work and trying to bring more conversations of accountability to, for example, our police department, but really just increasing access to services for so many of our low-income residents and really trying to bring quality of life to every single Las Cruces. And, I took this job in September as the executive director of Safety Over Profit, ultimately because I felt like it was really intertwined with so much of the justice work that I had already done. And it felt like in the current political moment that we're in New Mexico, especially regarding this doctor shortage and how it's been framed as a medical malpractice issue, has been really disheartening. And the reason ultimately I took the job was because I was seeing in that political debate that the people that were most directly impacted by that were being silenced and pushed to the sides. And to me, again, that's what makes this such an important justice issue, that the folks who have experienced, lifelong consequences of a healthcare system that prioritizes profit, that those voices were not being heard. And so that's why I took this job, and it's very, very hard right now, but I feel very much like I'm meant to be right here, right now.
I'm so excited for you to be in that role. I feel like since you took this position, the engagement has really increased. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about the mission of New Mexico Safety Over Profit?
Yes, absolutely. So New Mexico Safety Over Profit was started at about 5-6 years ago because the medical malpractice debate was sparked back in 2020, 2021, and so many attorneys were sort of at the center of it and were feeling like their clients needed to have a space and a vehicle to be able to not only advocate for themselves, but advocate for other people. You know better than I do that often some of your clients and directly impacted people are saying, I don't want this to happen to anyone else in New Mexico, my fellow neighbors, the people I love in my community. And they really want to take back some of the power that was ultimately taken from them in advocating for themselves and other people. And that's really what this vehicle of an organization is for. It's for a lot of these directly impacted people who, whose loved ones have died, who themselves are living with lifelong injuries and disabilities, who their children are living with disabilities. And so it's all of these folks who have really found a home here to advocate for better policies that can bring safer healthcare to New Mexicans. And actually, like I said, September is when I started, and so much of the political debate has been focused on patients and medical malpractice issues. But really, the vision for the organization, and certainly my vision, is to grow it, to increase and include other people who've been victims and survivors of corporate greed, right? Workers' issues, people on our roads, right? Like, since I took this job, I learned that that driverless semis were being tested on New Mexico roads. And so to me, it is a matter of this like corporate greed and corporate extraction from our communities and really bringing that to the forefront. And that is the mission and the vision for this organization, to be able to grow so that people with all of those kinds of stories can come here, can share their story, can find community, can hopefully heal a little bit in advocating for better policies for all New Mexicans and to keep us all safer.
That is so important. And I'll tell you, my son is in college, and that company that used to have their headquarters or, at least a large parking lot is near the university. And my son and his friends were shocked to hear that those were driverless semis, that just because someone was sitting in the driver's seat didn't necessarily mean that they were the ones driving. I think everybody that finds out about that is just horrified,
Horrified,
that New
absolutely
Mexicans are being
horrified.
guinea pigs, or that they
Yes,
were. I don't know if they still are, but there's so much that
there's
we
so much.
take for granted. Like,
Yes.
well, I don't know if very many people take for granted driving on New Mexico streets, but
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it just proves this greater point of what you just said, like New Mexicans being used as guinea pigs. And when I talk about
right.
corporate greed, like I really do mean like the extent of that. So it's this driverless semis, it's like Uber, hiring people that have very problematic pasts, especially when it comes to sexual assault and violence against women. When it comes to like insurance companies not paying survivors of sexual assault their due justice. And right now, the biggest thing where I feel like the most, like that meme with the strings, the red strings, I feel like that sometimes when I'm talking about private equity in our hospitals, and I joke about it, but it's so serious. And I just feel so like such a conspiracy theorist, but it's not. Like it's actually happening to New Mexicans. It is happening to us. And I just hope that, with all of these stories, that we can really shine a light on how we deserve so much better.
We do. And there's, anyway, one of the things I was thinking about recently is about how they spend so much money on the advertising. And I think many New Mexicans are willing to look past that and willing to kind of, think critically about whether the message is true. But we're bombarded with so much information on a daily basis and so much misinformation that it's just we're exhausted, and it's hard to really sort through what is real or what is truthful and what is spin and not truthful. But before we get too deep into that, I would like to know, when did you first know that you wanted to be a community organizer?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. I have always had this like compass that points toward justice. When I was little, I'm an immigrant in the United States. And so I think, and I lived in this really, when we first migrated to the United States, I lived in this very small town in northeastern Colorado. It's way up there. It's very cold. It's predominantly white. And I grew up in this place that like just othered me forever. And I think it just created this like sense of fairness inside of me, and like everything that gets filtered through that for forever for me. And so, when I went to college, I became a citizen when I was 16, changed my life. I went to college, I studied government at New Mexico State University, and mostly around like social political movements in Latin America. And so it just like gave me this whole new world. I certainly never thought I would be in government as an elected official, given how I was in undergrad. And then after that, I really, I knew I wanted to do something around social justice and immigration. For a while, I thought I was going to go work at USCIS on like the immigration office. I feel like my soul would have been crushed there. I found instead I found community organizing. So when I was getting my master's in social work, you have to do a placement, an internship. And I found this organization called New Mexico Café, Comunidades en Acción y de Fe. And they are a nonpartisan, faith-based community organizing effort in southern New Mexico. And that, when I first found them, it was like 2012, 2013, at the height of this really big immigration movement. And I just couldn't believe that this was somebody's job, like talking to people in my community, getting them to share their stories and fighting for better policies for our community. I just was swept away, and I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. And obviously through community organizing, I have really discovered this like very important like principle in life, that the people closest to the pain are the people closest to the solution. And so they should be the people closest to the power, right? If you want to change policies around immigration, go talk to immigrants. If you want to change policy around workers' rights, go talk to low-wage workers. If you want to change policies around medical malpractice, go talk to people who've experienced medical malpractice. Like this, like deeply lives within me, and it is really my guiding force.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And can you talk about some of the other people involved in New Mexico Safety Over Profit, and who they are and what their relationship is with each other and what kinds of things NMSOP does?
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, right now really our organizing efforts are to bring in directly impacted people who have these sometimes these really harrowing stories, these like really honestly tragic stories where they have experienced this life-altering moment in their life, whether it was themselves that have experienced medical negligence, medical racism, and it just changed the rest of their lives, someone they loved, a spouse, a child, a parent. And so all of these folks. And so often I get to meet these folks because they are, I'm being connected to them by their attorney. And, often in this conversation around medical malpractice, we hear like very intentionally, we are hearing disinformation and misinformation about trial attorneys and who they are. Frankly, in my almost 15 years of organizing, attorneys have always walked hand in hand by us in justice work, whether it's immigration or workers' rights or anything. Like attorneys have always been part of like my realm of work. And so to me, I'm like, attorneys have always fought for people in the margins. Like this is just what I know to be true. And in this work, I'm talking to attorneys who are connecting me to families, and they speak about those families with so much compassion and so much righteous anger often, right? Because they have seen often years, spanning decades sometimes, right? Like the relationship they have with their clients, because those folks are now in a place where, yes, this tragic thing happened to them, but they're ready to speak up about it and they're ready to fight back. And so, yeah, we work very, very closely with trial attorneys who are connecting us with directly impacted people, trial attorneys who are investing in this movement because certainly no one else is, investing in this work to to talk with directly impacted people. And then we're also working with other organizations in, nonprofits across New Mexico who have a base of people who are being impacted by healthcare systems or other corporate systems. And so, we really are building a movement made by people who really believe in access to the justice system, and when policy fails us, that we always have the courts to seek justice, or when the courts fail us, that we get to go back to policy and make changes for our lives.
I think it's so beautiful to have a space where clients or people who've been injured have an opportunity to connect with each other.
Yes.
And even if they don't feel, I think it takes a lot of courage for someone or a family member even to say, okay, I'm willing to go to Santa Fe and I'm willing to get involved in, telling my story. I think that takes a lot of courage. And I think even if people don't do that and don't speak publicly, there's still so much value in having them just be part of an organization where they can meet other people and find other people that have gone through something similar.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really validating. And I'll tell you from my perspective too, I think a lot of my clients who've been through awful things, they might be tired and they might be ready to move on. But I will tell you one thing that I think is really common, even if they do feel like that, it is important for them to know that what they went through had meaning, right? And meaning beyond, a settlement. I think for a lot of them, and sometimes we are able to put it into the terms of a settlement agreement, not always, but they want to know that a policy has changed, and not necessarily even like in terms of the law, but definitely in terms of at least a local hospital or a local nursing home, or that someone they want some form of acknowledgement, and I think that that's part of the healing process. I mean,
Yeah.
if you do you see that also?
Oh my gosh, thank you for lifting that up. That's absolutely one of the biggest pieces of this is community building. And I think often when I talk to people, and you know this too, is that what happened to them could be so isolating, right? Like it could just feel so overwhelming. They're feeling so powerless, and they just have their attorney or their family like that feels like they have their back, right? And so it could be such an isolating experience. And creating this organization, what I have found is that people are just, even though their stories are so unique and so different, that they have this thread that connects them that can feel so powerful and, like you said, healing. And for so many people, that healing might not come ever, right? Like it might just look, and it'll look different for a lot of people. But being in this community, being around other people who are at different stages, right, of their journey, can create a lot of solidarity. And I do think it's really powerful for them to hear from each other. And then sometimes I also experience where people who maybe experienced their injury or their that harm many years ago, and there's a new person who is now part of the work who just experienced it, there is so much anger in, like, what, how are we not, and like people want to be part of something that says enough is enough, right? Like when will we make a change? Like when will it be different for other people? And often I hear, these families talking about, this happened to my family, but I want to make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yeah.
And that is definitely, I feel like, the spirit of this 30-day session, and sessions in the future. I'm sure we'll have that, but legislative sessions. But I do feel like one of the biggest goals for us is to create that kind of community for people.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be invited to an event where a bunch of patients and their loved ones gathered to meet each other, and just it was really touching. And I could only stay, I came because I basically knew there was going to be food available.
Of
And
course. Yeah, that's how we get people anywhere.
I couldn't stay very long, but it was just so beautiful to hear people connecting and to have people who have done advocacy give advice to other people who are newer to the process. And because let's face it, for me, I think public speaking, I'm not sure that I'm wonderful at it, but I don't get nervous about it. And maybe I should be nervous, but I'm just
I
not.
know.
That's just
I
not how
know.
I was built. But I'm also aware that it is hard for a
Yeah,
lot of
very
people
hard.
to speak up and also to be just really vulnerable. And I thought it was just beautiful to hear the kind of more seasoned advocates giving advice and encouragement to the people who were sort of, just exploring the possibility about becoming an advocate.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. Thank you so much for coming. I hope that obviously like when we're in the middle of a legislative session and we're fighting bad bills or supporting good bills and we want to have people that are sharing their experiences, it can feel so transactional. Like it can feel like, oh my God, like it's just so quick and so fast just because of the makeup of our legislature, right? And a 30-day session. It can 1 minute sharing your story, like it could just feel so transactional that it feels really important to me for us to create spaces outside of that for people to get to know each other, to share their experiences and just to laugh, right? To find joy in community and also to share that experience of like this is what it's been like for me and I want to encourage you to share your story. I will meet with you about this experience and it's been really beautiful to watch that kind of solidarity with some of our older patient advocates and some of our newer patient advocates.
And I suspect they know, or I hope they know, but it really does make a difference. I can remember it's been maybe at least 10 years, but there was a proposed bill, and it had something to do with, I think, nursing homes. And I had a client whose loved one had just been through something really awful. And first of all, let me just say that it's probably worth saying that it's hard for people who are in the middle of the civil litigation process to speak up because there's always this concern that they're going to say something just a little bit wrong or whatever, and then it's just going to kill their whole case. And I'm not actually sure that that's really what happens, but there's a fear and I think a legitimate fear of, not letting people speak about their case so widely. So it's a really calculated decision to say to a client, yes, I support you going to the legislature and talking about your issue. I'm very much in favor of that because I think that's part of that healing process is for my clients to understand that the story that they have to tell can have an impact to help make a better community. But anyway, the story I wanted to tell is that we were sitting in this hearing in Santa Fe, and someone came over to us, one of my colleagues, and they said, listen, we just don't have the votes on this committee. It's getting late. It's 9 o'clock at night. And, sometimes legislative hearings go that late. They said, it's 9 o'clock. You guys should just go home because we don't have the votes. And I turned to my client and I said, well, it's up to you. Do you want to stay or and she said, no. I came all the way to Santa Fe. I want to tell my story. And I said, I'm here for you. I will sit by you. I will support you. And she didn't get to testify until probably close to 10 o'clock at night. And her story was so powerful that bill that she was testifying against, they ended up voting a thumbs down for that bill. Her story made a difference. And it's just, I think stories make a difference more than statistics
Statistics.
and more than lawyers, standing up and testifying. It's the true, authentic stories, truthful stories really make a difference.
Yeah. As an elected official, I have seen that, I have felt it. As a community organizer, I have seen it make a difference. And I think often, justifiably so, people think it won't make a difference because our like political system can be so nasty sometimes. It can just feel so demoralizing, justifiably so. And we just have to remember, like, especially in a state like New Mexico, where our elected officials, our legislators are so accessible, like right, they're like in our communities. And when you have a fellow New Mexican standing up, clearly nervous, like public speaking to me comes very naturally, and I know you and I are very much in the minority with that, right? But like for so many other people, it is just such a hard experience, not to mention the fact that then you're adding talking about a very tragic moment in your life, right? Like that is just never easy. And people think, I don't want to cry while I do it. And I always tell people, don't fight your emotions, like let it flow, however it's going to flow. That the people in a committee hearing, for example, those legislators are human at the end of the day, right? And so we might have ideas about who they are and their politics, but at the end of the day, they are still human beings, and if they're open to hearing someone's story, like it can really change. I think stories change hearts and minds, like you said, more than data and statistics can, for sure.
And in some ways, it's sort of sad, right? Why should people have to be so vulnerable in such a public way in order to be heard? And so I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about that. But for the people who are willing, for who consent to that, there's no substitute for it. It is one of the most powerful things.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, you're right. Like, it is sad that we have to share our stories in this way. And I think there's ways that we can share it that it can feel really transformational versus transactional, that where people feel like they feel empowered, right? And I think for me, it's really important to be in this role and make sure that when someone goes in a committee room, if I'm asking them to, speak up, that they understand this bill, that they understand the consequences of it, right? That they feel this sense of power when stepping into that place as a voter, as a constituent. And, that process can be really powerful. It could be sad and chaotic, but it can also be very powerful. And I'm just so grateful for the people we work with who are saying, yeah, absolutely, I'm coming, even though I'm scared, even though I'm nervous, even though it's hard for me to get to Santa Fe and spend a whole, day in the roundhouse. I'm coming because it's important to my family, it's important to me, and it's important for my community.
And I love that you're able to provide that context, right? The context that does make it a transformational healing process as opposed to just, this is a
Yeah.
person that we're putting out here to, accomplish something. I think that context is really valuable because I've heard legislators say, oh my goodness, why are you bringing people in wheelchairs here?
Yes.
And sort of
As if people didn't have autonomy, right, to be there. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I think it is empowering. It is, there are many, many frustrating things about the legislature, but it is a kind of a special place. I was there today and I feels a little superstitious almost, but I almost never wear turquoise, but I always wear turquoise. When I go to Santa Fe, I feel compelled
I love
because
that.
it feels like a special place. And that's where you go and you wear your turquoise jewelry. Because it's even with all of the pitfalls and the frustrations, it is still a very kind of hallowed hall where our ideals about the democratic process and our ideals about a citizen, legislature and just the ability of normal people to show up and speak in support or in opposition, it is really truly meaningful. And our elected officials do listen. They have a lot of people to answer to, and I think it's a very, very difficult job. I'm always in awe, but it's just incredible.
Yeah, and like the New Mexico legislature, with its many flaws, like that we're the only volunteer legislature left in the country, like our legislators don't get paid, like all of this 30-day session and a 60-day, like there's all these flaws, which could be another podcast on its own. But the reality is that they're incredibly accessible, that every one of those legislators is also a normal person from our community, right? Like, yes, there are some attorneys, there's some doctors, there's some nurses, there's, I don't know, people in the oil and gas industry, there's teachers, there's workers, there's organizers. Like, it is this really diverse set of people who are our legislators, who are our representatives, and they go to Santa Fe, they do this incredible hard work. And this roundhouse is the people's roundhouse. Like, we also get to go as normal people in a community and maybe not know anything about the legislative process or the intricacies of a bill or any of these things or how to get around that roundhouse. We might not know any of these things. That is still a place where that belongs to the people and where we can go in and make a big difference by sharing our 1 minute story, our 2 minute story, like talking to one to a legislator and getting them to understand that there is this different perspective. I think it's really meaningful and beautiful. And maybe I'm just this naive person who like got her government degree and believes in government. And maybe that's what it is. But I really do believe that people leading the way in government is how meaningful change happens.
We want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Adobe Pillar supporters, Fadul, Clough, Hardy, and Conaway, LLC, Poulos and Coates, and Tani, Acosta, and Chaparro, PC. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. Now, back to our conversation. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what is one of those quirky things about the legislature that you tell people who are showing up for the first time? I mean, is there anything, like, do you have a speech that you give to people? Because it has its own unique customs, right?
Gosh, absolutely. It's funny you ask me this because tomorrow I'm giving a legislative advocacy training to social workers. The School of Social Work at NMSU. They're bringing a bunch of social work students to the legislature and they invited me to come speak to them about it. And I always tell people this quirky thing, like, you literally will be so lost. Like, there's this word in Spanish, at least from Chihuahua, where I'm from, that's called being norteada. Like, it just means being turned around. Like, you literally have no idea where you are. What is north? What is south? Literally, you have no clue. There's like no windows. It's just this circle of chaos, and it is just impossible. And I don't know, like, obviously legislators who've been doing this for a long time, they know it like the back of their hand, but it is just, I don't get it. I don't get how people learn this silly round building.
It's hard. I mean, it's so symbolic, but for me, I think the buffalo is like a landmark.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to
I
know.
use the buffalo as a landmark and then the snack bar.
Perfect. I love that.
Yeah. And also, it's kind of nice because if you just wander in one direction, as long as you know which floor to be on, as long as you wander in one direction, eventually you'll get there.
Yeah, I love that. That's good advice.
And, I know that there are signs that say like east or west or whatever, and that doesn't necessarily help me.
Yeah.
The buffalo usually helps me.
I love that. Yes, I really love that. Like in Las Cruces, the mountains. To me, like, that is my compass, right? Where are the mountains? That's how I know where I am. Now I'm in Adapla in the roundhouse. It's the buffalo. Perfect.
Yes. And I also, let's see, I'm trying to think about what I've told to clients who have gone or new people. I think the formality. That is something that I think is beautiful. Sometimes people can be not very nice to each other, but for the most part, I'm impressed that there's a lot of collegiality and it's possible for people to disagree on substance, but still be kind and professional. And I think that there should be more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously we see instances where that's not true. Like, why do we focus on times where that sometimes happens? But because you're right, I think generally, like I said, it's just regular people working together, legislators, and it is beautiful to see people have conversations that are going to lead to something better.
One of the questions I have is whether it's okay for people to reach out to NMSOP, even if they haven't been involved in a lawsuit because I think about a lot of people that I turn down, and I explain to people lawsuits are time consuming, they're expensive, and I think most lawyers can be pretty picky about the cases that they accept. And I feel bad that I can't help everyone, but not every case is a good case to file. Are you interested in hearing from those people who maybe feel like they've been a victim of some of a system, but haven't gone through a lawsuit, or maybe so much time has passed that they can't do that anymore?
Oh my gosh, yes. Honestly, I think for me, anyone who's felt like they've experienced wrongdoing in a medical system, and even if you've tried to seek legal support and it just didn't go anywhere, or you maybe thought there's no way I can't afford a lawyer, right? Like often people don't seek out justice for themselves or their families because they're so exhausted by the end of it. They feel like it's not worth it. They feel like they've experienced so much trauma. They can't afford whatever it is. If you feel like you've experienced wrongdoing, if you feel like you've experienced medical racism, like you were discriminated against, not believed, whatever that story is, whether it's in a clinical setting or with you're a worker who was injured at work and felt like you didn't have any justice or support. If you are a victim of and a survivor of sexual assault and you feel like you have not found a political home to seek justice for yourself and your family or your loved ones. Any of these kinds of stories, regardless of whether you've sought out legal support or not, we welcome you and we want to hear from you. Absolutely.
Good. I think it's a great service because I think I've heard from some people who've said, "Oh, I experienced something, but I didn't have the energy or the courage to pursue it, or I had more important things to worry about." And thankfully, those people were able to, survive and get through what the day and what they had to do, but it's only in retrospect that they think, oh my gosh, I could have done that. And maybe they couldn't have been active at the time, but they still have an opportunity to have that experience be something meaningful in terms of
Yeah.
policy.
Absolutely. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not a licensed therapist. That's not the kind of work we're offering. Like we just really are this vehicle for you. If something happened to you and it felt powerless, that this place can be a place for you to reclaim a little bit of that power and really and fight for justice for yourself and other people. And that's really the vision for this work. And hopefully people can find their voice and feel supported if they have lived for a long time feeling like they weren't.
Yeah. Joanna, before I ask you the fun question, is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
Oh my gosh, you know what? Going back to my meme of like the strings, I always talk about like private equity as if everyone knows what it is, but I want to just come back to it for a second because at least because I think it's so important for us who are in this conspiracy that's not a conspiracy at all, that's very real, to talk about this way in a way for New Mexicans to understand the severity of the situation, right? So like these private equity firms, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just go into my
Please.
private equity are essentially multi-billion dollar corporation investors out of Wall Street, like literally multi-billion dollar investors who bought out, who figured out that healthcare was profitable. And don't get me wrong, private equity has its fingers in so many things, public utilities, housing, nursing homes. Like they have really said, where can we get the most profit for our shareholders, for investors? And that's where we're going to go. In healthcare, in New Mexico specifically, this is a national problem, but in New Mexico specifically, New Mexico has the largest proportion of private equity owned hospitals in the country, meaning that private equity firms, shareholders, multi billionaires are making decisions about our hospitals, not doctors, not healthcare professionals. No, they're making decisions that are going to benefit them, that are going to profit them, and that are going to and are endangering patients. They're burning out doctors and medical professionals. Like the problem with private equity is so vile and so evil, and it is so unfortunately persistent in New Mexico in our healthcare system. And right now, honestly, that's who's influencing policies on how not to hold them accountable. And we must first absolutely bring accountability and oversight to private equity and healthcare and in many other areas like housing as well. And it's just not happening fast enough anywhere in the country. There are some states making headway, but New Mexico has to be there. And I think it's really important that New Mexicans learn about this, understand it, and how it's impacting them.
That's so important. Seems like it's kind of a buzzword, and I'm not sure that a lot of people really understand it. The way I explain it is that back in the old days, when I used to file a lawsuit against a big corporation, one of my favorite things, it's actually not that interesting, but would be to go to the SEC website and download all of their financial reports. If they're publicly traded, then I can go to the SEC and I can read whatever they're telling their shareholders, right? And that's a private company, but there's a level of transparency inherent in when it's a publicly traded company. But private equity is just, there's no transparency whatsoever. There's no requirement that they make any of that information public.
Nope.
And it's just this dark black box or black hole of information and we can't access. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure they have very sophisticated financial analysis of, separating out the real estate, they call it separating the assets from the liabilities. So, extracting all of the profit, extracting the anything that could be of value and putting that segregating that from the actual labor cost and the people who are actually doing the work. They call that the liability part of it. And it's a kind of a sophisticated concept, but it's
Sinister.
something that's
That's
become
what it is.
increasingly
Yeah.
concerning in recent years. It's been ages since I've sued a company that was just, some kind of publicly traded company.
Yeah, it's really sinister, and it's important that we know about it.
Okay, are you ready for a fun question?
Yes. Okay, let's.
As a New Mexico person, what is your favorite either day trip or meal that you enjoy? What brings you joy about New Mexico?
Oh, I love New Mexico so much. I'm from Chihuahua and I currently live in Las Cruces, which is the Chihuahuan desert. So it feels to me like I was meant to be here. I really love this community. I love this place. For immigrants, I think often like that search for home never comes for a lot of people. It came for me, and I feel really honored and privileged. I love, 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 love our Oregon mountains. I love looking at our Oregon mountains, going to our hikes on our Oregon mountains. And also, I love eating the green chili chicken enchiladas at Andales is one of my
Mm,
favorites to go.
okay.
So, oh,
Excellent.
and also for even more fun, our Dry Point Distilleries, which has amazing and fun cocktails, and they make all of their gin and whiskey here, and I love them so much.
I love that. And I love that so many local people are getting involved in just the artisan craft food and
Yes,
beverages
love it.
and sourcing all of the local agriculture.
Yes, New
Um,
Mexico just has like so many talented people, and I just love it so much.
it's fantastic. I would love to buy you lunch the next time I'm in Las Cruces.
No, I'm gonna buy you lunch when you're here. You
We'll
come
have
here.
to fight over it.
Yes, okay.
Thank you so much for being our second guest,
Yes.
and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you so much, Felice. This was fun.
All right, Joanna, take care. Have a good night.
Bye, you too.
Before we wrap up, we want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Chili Circle supporters, the Tracy Law Firm, and Curtis and Company. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury.
Thanks for joining us on New Mexico Legal Lowdown. If today's conversation changed how you see the legal system, share it with a friend. We'll be back next time with another trial lawyer fighting for New Mexicans. Produced and powered by LawPods.